The tragic news on Friday of the death of the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at the age of 67. He was shot in the back and the neck while delivering a speech at a campaign event in the southern city of Nara, about 480 kilometres from Tokyo. A 41-year-old man who's been described as a loner made the gun from buying parts online, shot Abe and was immediately tackled at the scene. He's now in custody. It's believed the man's mother donated money to a religious group which he believed Abe was a part of, and therein lies his motive, though authorities are not yet sure. No figure in Japanese polity can match Abe's network of relationships with world leaders. For example, India declared a national day of mourning, and America's White House lowered its flag to half-mast in his honour. Here in Australia, the Sydney Opera House sails projected an image of the Japanese flag. First elected to Parliament in 1993, Abe became Japan's youngest post-war Prime Minister in 2006 at the age of 52. He stepped down a year later, citing health reasons. Then in 2012, he served a second term as PM until 2020, making him Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister. He relinquished the Prime Ministership again, revealing he had suffered a relapse of ulcerative colitis, an inflammatory bowel disease. Sadly, his send-off as Prime Minister was like his death, not fitting of the man. Japan, as you know, was to host the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, but it was delayed until 2021. Abe once said that when Tokyo was announced as the host city, he was happier than he'd been when he became Prime Minister. He had hoped that the Olympic Games would inject hope and happiness into Japan after decades of economic stagnation, demographic decline and disastrous natural disasters. He'd hoped the Games would be a swan song. But in a sense, it was not to be. He was no longer Prime Minister, and coronavirus, of course, made a mess of the best-laid plans. A graduate in political science from Sekai University in Tokyo, before studying public policy in the US, he began his career working for a steel manufacturer. His grandfather had served as Prime Minister, while his father previously served as Foreign Minister. Abe married his wife Aki, a Japanese radio DJ and socialite, in 1987. She was nicknamed the Domestic Opposition Party due to her outspoken views, which often contradicted those of her husband. Abe and his wife had no children, having undergone unsuccessful fertility treatments early in their marriage. He'll be remembered as the face of a more assertive Japan, a country which is wedged in a strategically challenging part of the world, with China and North Korea nearby, and which grapples daily with its dark history. He forged strong relationships with Western democracies, and security was a big priority for him. As for the Japanese economy, which faces enduring structural problems like an ageing population, he attempted to resuscitate it through trade deals, slashing tariffs, and more women in the workplace, including more foreign workers. Many now say the government will use Abe's death to highlight the need for the kind of security policies he championed. His one disappointment was his failure to gain support in reversing the pacifist constitution of Japan and nudge Japan towards some level of independence from the United States. This was all a legacy, of course, of World War II, when Japan was caught up in World War II, as you know, and then the Constitution embedded in the Constitution was the failure. Japan not allowed really to entertain international engagement. So it should be said, though, in seeking to revise the Constitution, Abe did anger China and South Korea, who were two victims of Japan's 20th century militarism. Even though he led his party to commanding victories in national elections, he was never able to push through the constitutional change. But how a former PM was allowed to be standing out, campaigning in the open with minimal security, has sparked debate. Questions are now being asked about politicians and their security to avoid tragedies like this from occurring. Though it should be said, history records there have been similar assassinations of public figures in Japan in the past. In the new world of Japan, post Abe's death, authorities should be guided by this history.